cultural conversation in a institutional systemic perspective would not have allowed us to make the changes that we have made. So we examined our data back to 2013, 45 or students with 45 units or more with no degree. That included students that did have the Golden 4, as Antonio mentioned, 2,800. Students with 60 units or more with no degree, almost 700. And students that transferred to partner institutions without a degree, 383. What's interesting about that 383 is at deeper glance, over half of them had fallen out of the pathway at their the CSU that they had transferred to. So significant group of folks with lots of credits and nothing to show for it. Next slide, please. What we realized in that cultural piece is these are students that had put in a lot of effort and a lot of commitment. They took math and English, they took their Golden 4, they had put a lot of time in. And for some reason, we didn't serve them across the finish line. So one of the things that we really thought of right up front was this was sort of our last chance, the last chance we would have to engage these students. For whatever reason, they left us, whether it be something in their own lives or something that happened at the institution. But really, if we reached out to them, we wanted to make sure that we could say, you know, it's different now, we want you back, and we're ready for you to come back. So we have Dean Stacy Bartlett on the call. She is our communication, she was a communication professor forever, and now she's dean, and also a student that re-engaged later in her career as well. So Stacy refers to herself as from dropout to dean, and is an amazing firsthand story that always reminds us what it is like to serve adults in our institutions. So Stacy recognized the importance of making sure that we are ready when the students called us back. She performed a training for all frontline staff about degrees when due, so that whoever called back, so if we reached out to someone and said, come on back, and then they called Shasta College and we said, you know, they got either a, you know, push 1, push 2, or I'm not sure what you're talking about, we might lose them forever. So making sure anybody that might get a call about degrees when due was ready. Stacey, you want to add a little bit more about that?
I think you really hit it, Kate. The main thing is that what we know through a lot of different surveys is that people want to talk to people, and they want those people to know a little bit about them and to demonstrate caring and concern. If it becomes a very high-tech solution, then you're going to lose the people who are very familiar and in need of the very high-touch solution. So the warmth of a telephone, believe it or not, tone of voice, smile over the phone is going to make a huge difference for many of these folks.
Thanks, Stacy. We also spoke to the governing board. We spoke to academic senate. We talked to our classified professionals about the program and what it meant for our students in our school and our community. We built a degree when due webpage, and then we had a designated phone call for anybody that was inquiring about degrees when due. So all from the philosophy of, we have learned a lot about ourselves, our students are valuable, they were committed, it's up to us to get them back. And it was just this rallying cry. And as Stacy said, many of these students feel disenfranchised by Shasta College. We have one shot to reach them. And if they call back and we are not prepared to serve them, we may lose them forever. So that was that foundation of the cultural piece. Next slide, please. So these are the buckets that we have found. And what's really interesting is that 201, working with your campuses, the buckets are similar. So even though we're all unique and the details are unique for our campuses, these buckets seem to be shared. So before you re-engage your students, you've identified through the data and then good analysis, just some buckets. Did the students earn a degree but not receive it because of timelines or unclear policies for degree conferral? So one of our buckets was they got a degree but didn't know they had to petition for it or didn't know the timeline for doing that. That unique group of students is interesting because when we reach out to them and say, good news, you actually have a degree, we follow that with log back into your portal and apply for that degree, we might not reach that student because they've already had a bad experience with that. And our partners at Readly brought that up as well. So if this was the barrier that prevented them to leave, a little bit more hand-holding might be required for that particular group of students. The other bucket was, are there unclear curriculum requirements that became barriers to the students? That is a really common bucket that we found absolutely at Shasta College. People didn't understand some of the requirements, and that ended up getting them at the end where they thought they had completed the science with the lab, or they had thought they had met a requirement and they hadn't. What's really interesting about the curriculum requirements and the confusion around that, and Leanne just mentioned that that's happening in other states as well, is sometimes that confusion is not just on the student, but on our own teams as well. So many colleges have identified the multicultural requirement as a confusion point for students. And we had that as well. And that confusion extended to our counselors that weren't sure maybe where something could double count or what was in that bucket. I'm also seeing a lot of folks with confusion around health and wellness. What does that mean for students might be something different from for the campuses. But clarifying that confusion is not just on the students, but also on the counselor or the advisor that might be helping that student on return. The other bucket is a curriculum requirement that may no longer be relevant. Shasta College and several others have recognized the computer literacy requirement as being a barrier. We were able to bring the data to our academic senate that they changed and then got rid of that requirement. But just taking a really good look at the curriculum that you have on the books, is it still relevant? It may have met important in the past, but no longer is relevant. We also see that with some of the math requirements that have changed, and really, really interesting conversation because it also can get into catalog rights, but just a really important bucket to think about. The next bucket is for students that didn't qualify for the degree sought, did they earn a different degree? One of the things we found at Shasta College was because of our systems and what was automated and what wasn't, students were being evaluated against the degree that they had on their ed plan, even if they may have updated that ed plan somewhere else. So there was often a disconnect between an updated ed goal and what was on their ed plan. So if we're only evaluating towards the ed plan that is written, then we might not be serving that student. Another part that we found was that some of the students were seeking an ADT and maybe missed one key course. So they were going for the psychology ADT, but they missed their extensive research course, which prevented them from getting an ADT, but meant that they earned a local degree. So some of that conversation was, good news, you actually had earned this degree. Do you want to go for this class again because you're so close, or do you want to have this degree or both? And just making sure that the ed goal and record is up to date. One of the other things I'm finding a commonality amongst the many of the colleges is when we add the course data from other transcripts. And I've learned a lot from our partners that do that upfront while we're doing that at the end. And so some of those gaps we found for students was coming late in their career instead of in the beginning. So another bucket to think about is, what is the avenue back for students that are a few courses or requirements short? Do you have a way back for the students that makes sense to them? If we lost students because they couldn't take a course during the workday because they were working, can we reach out to them and say, we're offering that course at a different time now. You will be able to access that course in a manner that suits your needs based on your work and your family. So what are the ways back for those students? That also concludes some of the things that we're talking about with barriers around debt, around different types of challenges, academic probation. So what does that avenue back for that student look like? And the more tailored we can do that, the more success that we have had. And then are you making sure that you're not inviting adults back to the same program model that didn't serve them well in the first place? We have done such great work around remediation, and of course, what we recognized was how many students were tripped up in those remedial sequences around math or English, or when we offer course taking patterns. What have we learned from that, and how do we let students know that they're coming back to a different program that's has more flexibility, has different course modalities, as Tahoe mentioned, might honor some of that credit for prior learning experience. So just making sure that to remedy those issues before we bring them back to us. So when I get to be a part of the community of practice, or when I get to talk to colleges throughout the state, these are the commonalities that so many people are trying to tackle, and I'm excited for folks to be able to share best practices. One of those best practices really is how people are using care dollars. So if you can talk to your partners at Yuba and at Shasta College, we learned from Yuba and are now using some of that Recovery Care Act dollars to get more capacity around this. So just more buckets to think about before we re-engage. So Stacey, our dean, always reminds us when we bring them back, we are ready for them. Next slide, please. So task force worked on the actual logistics of how we're going to re-engage them. We did a lot of work around trying to learn from transcripts and from talking to students, as we mentioned earlier. And now here's some of the logistics of what we actually did. This all, there's great examples in the LMS of how we actually targeted students. And so, for example, a common need that we found at first was that they didn't have their degree because they needed a computer literacy requirement. So we would send them an email about what they needed and how they could get it. We'd wait a week. If no contact, follow up with the phone, wait a week, send a letter. Again, we'd also have tailored messaging that I'll talk a little bit about if they achieved the degree. Send an email, 1 week, follow with a phone call, 1 week, send a letter. So there was a very detailed methodology that we had around the correspondence that we sent out. Next slide, please. We also tailored correspondence for our students. Congratulations, you've earned a degree, or great news, you're really close to finish your credential. Also, it looks like you might qualify for a different degree. And what we really tried to do, no matter what we sent, was what we needed from the students. So it looks like you may have qualified for a different degree, but we'd love to talk to you about it. Please call or contact this person. Or you may be closer than we realize. Do you have a transcript from another institution that you can share with us? So in our correspondence, we tailored it and then provided them with the next steps that they needed to do to get closer to that degree. And just a note, we were using emails, letters, and phone calls, but several of our peers on this phone call are having great success with texting. So again, it's something I've learned from others and another avenue as we move forward. We did find that the tailored correspondence and really personalizing it for the student, and then having the name of the counselor or the person that would be getting the phone call back know who that student is and say, oh yeah, I see right here, this is what we need to do, was very helpful. Unfortunately, with the number so large, that might not always be the case, but this was the ideal that we were shooting for. Next slide, please. So just more details. I know this PowerPoint will be shared, so wanted to include this, but we can share this to anyone that wants, and also there's other great examples out there too. So this was the example when they're missing the computer literacy requirement, which was a full 40% of our students off the bat that hadn't received a degree. At that time, it was, about the program, this is what you're missing. These are all the different ways that you can to meet that requirement. So again, the issue and then what they can do about it. Next slide, please. So this is when they earn the degree. These are the fun letters. And again, some of the phone calls around this as well just brings a lot of joy, and just a reminder that these are individual lives that we are impacting, and can keep you really going strong. But I wanted to point out the bold item on the bottom, declining your degree. What we did was we looked for a opt-out versus opt-in approach for the students that had earned a degree, recognizing that some of the barriers that led to them not getting that degree in the first place would still be there if we said, come on back and fill this out and join a portal. And so we went with opting out. And we were very clear in the correspondence, and we would tell them if they did not wish to be awarded that degree that they have earned to let us know. So they had an avenue for declining that degree from the 2 weeks from when they received that correspondence. And that could be for whatever reason, just student preference, or at first we were really worried about the implication of financial aid, or maybe on immigration status and how that could impact. That did not turn out to be the case. We put much more caution into it than was the reality for our students, but we just want to honor that they have that option if needed. Next slide, please. So this is for the near completers. We would let them know what they were missing specifically. Sometimes that was one thing, sometimes it was 3 things. But that we were really targeting them. Did you attend another institution we didn't know about it? Do you have credit for prior learning that might meet that requirement? We were surprised at how many folks weren't graduating because they're missing worksite learning. And then when you talk to them, the reason they didn't have worksite learning is because they had a job in their field. So can credit for prior learning help you get that initiative? Did they take an EP class that we weren't aware of? Did they pick up a course somewhere else? So we would really try to give them those options to make sure that we had all the data that we needed to move forward. The other piece that we're so grateful for is that during this process, our ACE program, which was targeted for adults with some college no degree, for working adults, with those with multiple requirements of family, we created 8-week courses that happened multiple times during the semester, set schedules, and that could be offered outside the 8 to 5 day. So we wanted to let folks know, if you're only missing math, good news, we've got a math course starting September 15th. We'll hold a seat for you. So this is where I got a little bit more detailed and tailored for students. Next slide, please. So we also, early in the presentation, I talked about that 383 students that had left our institution, went to our partner CSU. We started with those folks around reverse transfer. We're very grateful to our CSU Chico that really helped us to get some of that data and some of the transcripts. So our information to those students was to help us get the transcript or give us permission to seek out their transcript or to come in and meet with a counselor. So wanted to give them multiple ways to make that happen as well. Next slide, please. So this is the correspondence that goes with our reverse transfer, just for your reading pleasure after the call. Next slide, please. For outcomes, and these are growing still. We are very fortunate that we were able to learn from some of the other colleges on this call about how to use recovery dollars to get more transcript auditors and to get some student success facilitators. But we just, out of the 757 transcript evaluated, 143 reverse transfer students, we were able to confer 286 degrees. We have 50 appointments right now to come back in and complete an AA. And what was exciting is when we did say, congratulations, you were successful. If you're interested in learning more about BA programs, contact us, and we have 10 students that are interested to keep going. The common message we get from students is, I knew it. I knew I could do it. I've been holding this burden on my shoulders that somehow I didn't complete what I started, or somehow I wasn't college material just as everyone told me. And so some of that, the relief of that burden of something that the student did that comes off their shoulders when we either say, we changed that requirement, or sorry for that confusion, or you've actually earned what you set out to do. It's been fun to have those students say, I knew it, and help me with the next step, please. Next slide. So again, back to Dr. Joe Weiss. In the midst of a crisis, I cannot help but think that efforts to help prior students be awarded the degrees they already earned is an even stronger moral imperative than prior to this time. So as Natalie from Reedley College, their marketing effort is "You're closer than you think." And I think that is just such a message for all of us. Our students are so close. They're closer than they think to earning this degree, and the impact that what that might mean right now, closer than they think to a degree, to a new career, to fulfilling a goal, to serving their families in different ways, is so important right now as we're all recovering from this particular crisis. So just so much kudos to the Shasta College team and the willingness to tackle the cultural work that this is all a part of, and just excited to keep moving forward.